All right, so let's begin. Genesis 14, 1 through 16, Lot's capture and rescue. This one should go by pretty quick, but we'll just do it real quick and hopefully it'll go as I'm planning. So, all right, here we go. So, Genesis 14, 1 through 16, Lot's capture and rescue. So, chapter 14, verse 1 through 7. Now it came to pass in the reign of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elessar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemabir, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea, Dead Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. Now in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings with him came and cut down the giants in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and strong nations with them, the Zuzim and Ham, the Emim and Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the mountains of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mispot, that is Kadesh, and cut down all the princes of the Amalekites. So the Amorites, who dwelt in Hazeron Tamar, also. Uh, Now the king of Sodom, or chapter 14, verse 8 through 12. Now the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and joined together in the battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Ellasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell in there, but those left fled to the mountains. Then they took all the cavalry of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abraham's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods and departed. 14 verses 13 through 16. Then one who escaped came and told Abraham the Hebrew, who at that time dwelt by the oak of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and they were allies with Abraham. Now when Abraham heard his nephew Lot was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants, born in his own house, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So he divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked and pursued them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. So he brought back all the cavalry of Sodom, and also brought back his nephew Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. So, what do we get from this? So we get 4 kings get mentioned, and these are kings of city-states. So these guys made war with 5 kings. These northern kings attacked the southern kings in a raid to rob, pillage, and take slaves. So they fight in the valley of Siddim, which would be now the Dead Sea. And it says that they served Chedorlaomer for 12 years and rebelled against him on the 13th year. So that they were probably paying tribute to him, which that's protection money. And they were likely under a suzerain and vassal type of relationship. We do not know why they quit and participate with it, but they do. So these northern kings, on their way for their tributes, take out a bunch of the Nephilim clans in Ashtaroth Karnaim and some strong nations too. What made you a member of a tribe or clan was not based on your genes or your ethnicity. It was based on the rituals and your ritual life. So the Nephilim clans, for example, would sacrifice meals, cannibalize, and partook in sexual rituals. And if you weren't participating, then you weren't a part of this Nephilim clan. So Amorite, when, for example, God says no more Amalekites, right? Like no more Amalekites, right? He says he means that way of ritual life, not that the entire people from that clan are going to be eradicated. They take down them, the Zuzim, Emim, the Horites, and the princes of the Amalekites and Amorites as well. So even though these aren't good guys, really, they end up doing God's will in the big scheme of things, and a good result is ultimately done. What they meant and did for evil, God used for good. And it mentions Kadesh, which means a place for justice. That's what the name means. And funny enough here, like we've talked about Ezra, right? The editor. Amalek is mentioned here. So Amalek's not born yet. He's a descendant of Esau, and Esau's not born yet, right? So this is another part where we see Ezra is editing stuff again. So these two fight in a valley full of asphalt and tar pits. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fall and they flee, and so the five kings of the south lose. So the northern kings seized all of the southern city states' wealth, and they took Lot and his people as well as his goods. So the text says Lot was now dwelling in Sodom. So we see that Lot went from pitching a tent near it to living in it. So we're seeing he had a bad progression, right? But then we see one of Lot's people, Mamre, who lived by the oak tree. He escaped to tell Abraham what had happened, and we see that the one who tells Abraham is an Amorite. So Mamre is not participating in the Amorite way of life because he's allied himself with Abraham and Lot, right? And they worship Yahweh. So he is not part of the Nephilim clan, though he may have been born an Amorite. So he's not ritually part of it, right? Because obviously Abraham wouldn't have wanted to be a part of that, and we'll see that later why that's the case. But anyways, verse 14, we also get Dan being mentioned. And so he's mentioned before Dan is born, right? So the editor is struck again here to give people placemates, since they're reading this, from the exile, they're reading this and they're going, oh, that's where this is, So Abraham takes his 318 trained servants. So he has a lot of people working for him, he's got a lot of people. And they go out to rescue Lot. So they attack at night and they rescue Lot, his people, and Sodomites along with their possessions. So they actually go and save some Sodomites too. And we also see that the Sodomite king, he did not go to save his people, kind of a coward. And we'll talk more about that in the next podcast, though. But we'll keep going here. So, one cool fact about the Orthodox Church, because I'm going to share that today. The Orthodox Church reads Genesis 14:14 at our Feast of the Holy Fathers when we celebrate the First Ecumenical Council, right? Because at the Council of Nicaea, it's said that 318 bishops stood up for the true Christian faith. The story of Abraham saving Lot is that Lot wandered off, got drawn into the world and its temptations, and captured and enslaved him. So Abraham, his father and patriarch, went after him, found him, defeated those evil forces who enslaved Lot, set him free, and rescued him. So that's why we read this at the Feast of the Holy Fathers when we celebrate the First Ecumenical Council. And that's when we celebrate the Council of Nicaea. So I think that's pretty cool. But I'll let you decide if you think that's cool or not. But the reason we read this before the feast and before celebrating the councils is because this is what the church understands to have happened at these councils. So at the First Ecumenical Council, these men stood up to free and rescue those that were enslaved by the heresy of evil men like Arius and later on Nestorius, etc., who have opposed God, right? So this is what the church is trying to communicate to us when we read this story. And so at the end of the day, Abraham clearly typologizes Christ here and presents us with a beautiful typology of him redeeming us, Christ redeeming us from Satan, sin, and death itself by using Lot, right? So Lot kind of represents us. Like, we've fallen in sin. We're headed into the wrong place because we were hanging out in Sodom, right? And Christ Abraham typologizes Christ, and Abraham goes and saves Lot. So it's kind of like Christ saving us. So I think that's pretty cool. But anyways, next up, we're going to do Genesis 14:17 through 23, I think it's right, where it's a bit about Melchizedek, right? But we're going to do that on the next go around. So I hope you enjoyed that one. I know it was a really short one because usually they're a little longer than this. The next one might be a little longer. And Genesis 15 through 18, I think, are going to be a lot longer. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. If you liked this, hit like, subscribe, and thank you for listening, and God bless.